Hello everyone, welcome to Level Up IS. Myself Tejal Khandelwal. So we have already done a first reaction to the PSIR UPSC optional paper 1, okay, and today we will be doing a detailed analysis of paper 2. Like I pointed in my discussion in the earlier video, that yes, with respect to the trend, there is continuity with change, with a lot of change, and this change has been there since 2019, and not that it has come somewhere out of the blue in 2022. Okay. So yes, but there have been some trends which were very new in 2022 paper, in paper 1. Now, if we analyze the overall paper 2, okay, there is more continuity than change, okay, and in a relative comparison to the last 4 years, okay, this time the paper is relatively easy. Paper 2 is relatively easy, okay. So we will today hold a key discussion on how you should have approached things. What was the essence of the question asking? Okay. So let's see and let's begin. So if we see, okay, paper 2. I have not done a detailed analysis of paper 1, which will be following in the upcoming week. But in paper 2, there has been a very clear overlap from the crash course that we did this year. Last year, we had a test series program, but this year we did a crash course, and there has been clear overlap of so many questions. I think take a glance and you will know that what has been the overlap, and this overlap has not only been in terms of thematic, like the theme repeating in the exam, but the line on which questions have been asked, okay, and lines on questions also which are very new, which have not been covered by students usually, like pertaining to the conventions on terrorism. We had given that question, okay. Even the critical approaches to the mainstream theories, this question I had asked in test number 8. So we see that many of the questions, okay, which students usually feel a little lack on, okay, this have been asked. Also from last year 2021 test series, there has been a lot of overlap, okay. So I will very clearly point to you what has overlapped, and we will also discuss the structure of every question so that you get a detailed analysis of how you should have approached that particular question, okay. So first question is, discuss the main limitations of the comparative method to the study of political science. Okay. So we had asked this, the first question in our test 4 only. Evaluate the contemporary significance and contribution of the contemporary method. And comparative method. Okay. Comparative method is directly mentioned in your syllabus. Fine. And already in 2019 also a question has been asked on the same lines. So anyone who is sane and preparing and is a thinking mind should know that any question, okay, or any theme which appears once in UPSC past year question, it should become a Bible, and you should be able to have a command over it. It is not that, we should not only explore the other dimensions of the same theme, but you should have command of any past year question, okay, and that happens only when you practice, right, on the routine basis. So yes, this is a direct overlap with this year crash course 2022, and yes, it is very much directly from the syllabus. It is a very easy question, and there was not too much thought that has to go behind attempting this particular question. Anyway, let's see what is the demand of this particular question, okay. So we know that the emphasis of how comparison is a very key feature of human thinking, okay, has been pointed by Gabriel Almond and scholars like Aaron Liphart, all right. So yes, Gabriel Almond and even scholars like emphasize the importance of comparative method. Okay. There are also scholars who contest the very nature of comparative method. Okay. So like Eisenstadt, right? So this is the idea, and Almond says it can be compared with what? It can be said as like a scientific method. Now in this question, what has been, why we say that, what are the limitations in the comparative method? So firstly, that you should be pointing of what is the comparative method. Okay. The first structure of the question is what is the comparative method and what is the view of scholars on this comparative method. Okay. How Almond equated with scientific method, how Arendt Lippard says that it is a very important method. Then what is the key assumption that is going behind the comparative method? Why it has come into being? It has come into being because the traditional comparative methods were not sufficient. So modern comparative methods helped in what? Categorizing, classification, okay, providing hypothesis, empirical testing, model analysis. Okay. So in this context, we first will talk about the significance of modern comparative methods. Okay. So first we spoke about the meaning of the method. Then we will be talking about the significance of the method. And then we will be talking about its key limitations. Okay. So when we talk about key limitations, what are the key limitations of comparative method? So yes, firstly, the idea that, problem of standardization, precise definition. Sartori also says that, in the garb of giving precise definitions, there is conceptual stretching also that happens. Then analyzing data is also a very key problem because there is so much data. Also with respect to the value-free analysis, okay, any behavior cannot have a value-free analysis, okay, because comparative method has been obviously a wave that has come in the behavioral revolution. So other problem is, we cannot analyze political behavior on completely rational basis. Fine. So this kind of limitations should have been pointed, and in the end you should have just written in like a line the relevance of this method even today. Okay, so how it will help. So you could have also linked it with the COVID crisis and how comparison of political regimes with respect to what extent they are efficient in managing this crisis. Okay, so giving it that kind of a contemporary touch will also add value to the question. So understood how comparative method, who are these scholars, what is its meaning, how it helps in comparison, classification, okay, and yes, obviously with respect to discovering relationships amongst variables. So this should have been the structure of the question. All right, a very easy question, good to do if you have covered it within the framework of the syllabus. And yes, crash course overlap has been there, very straightforward. Now, next question. So the next question is asking, what are the main challenges faced by the developing countries in the era of globalization? Okay. So if we see, I have already asked what is the impact of globalization on the internal functioning of the state. Okay. So automatically when I was talking of the impact, I was also pointing towards the challenges, and yes, how it is there in the developing as well as developed countries. What has been the response? So we know this question is directly from the syllabus, but how well we integrate the dimensions of the challenges and integrate the key thinkers, okay, that was the art of this question. That's why I have not termed it as easy but moderate, because students will just tend to write a GS answer if they are not able to integrate the key scholars of globalization with respect to how these challenges are posed, right? So in the developing countries. So we know that already this impact of process of globalization has come in 2020. So globalization and associated questions are very repeated in that sense. Now let's see the structure of this particular question. Okay, challenges of globalization from the what perspective of the developing countries, from the perspective of the developing countries. Okay, now, so how do we begin this question? So Kenichi Ohme or Marshall McLuhan's, right, definition of globalization, right, how the process of globalization that has begun has started to being evaluated and examined in both developed as well as the developing countries, and why the challenges that are there to the developing countries. Let's see those dimensions. So the first dimension is what? It is on the sovereignty of the state. And in this regard, you can bring what dimension? Okay, sovereignty of the state. So we can say that how globalization has brought in a crisis of the nation state. So initially how sovereignty was assumed, okay, in these developing countries is no more the same. And how there is crisis of nation state, why? Because there is a cultural backlash, right, on how the state is being organized. So it cannot obviously be the what same that has been there in the developed crisis, so developed country. So this has led to the crisis of the nation state. And this brings challenges to what? So how we will interlink this? So this brings challenges to democracy. So how? So challenges to the concept of sovereignty has come under question, and this raises question for democracy. This raises question for democracy. Okay. So yes, you can talk about how Martin Wolf, okay, he says that how it weakens democracy in that sense. Fine. Even Joseph Stiglitz talk about how there is deficit in these democratic deficit in global institutions and how it impacts these developing countries also. Okay. Then the third dimension that could have been is with respect to explored is inequality. How it creates inequalities, and these inequalities are arising why? Okay, because of the neoliberal globalization, MNCs that are coming, how states are, formulating policies for better investment. So it has created inequality. So you should have brought in idea of how Noam Chomsky talks about the ill effects of neoliberal globalization. Okay, then even Joseph Stiglitz. So bringing with the dimension, the scholars is very, very key, right? Fine. Then with respect to how, there is rise of, what does Professor Ramesh Thakur and George Hines say, okay? So this has led to rise of uncivil society rather than rise of civilized society. So this uncivil society and has led to what kind of forces? Forces like terrorism has come, transnational crime, okay, crimes against women, all this has been rise in the developing countries, all right? And one more key dimension of challenge that is there because of globalization is what? Is the challenge that is there on environment and degradation of environment. So you should have brought in the views of Vandana Shiva, right, Arundhati Roy, okay, and also spoke about the challenge of environment. So in this question, main idea is how with the dimensions of challenges you bring in the key thinkers, okay. So this is the gist of the structure of the question. Very doable this question is, provided you bring in the relevant scholars and raise the right challenges. Okay. So I am very happy about this question specifically, because in the last test, okay, which students usually don't attempt, it is a comprehensive paper, right? I had given this question. How so UPSC question is, discuss the commonalities between the Marxist and realist approach to the study of international politics. Okay. So very difficult that, students, when one more notch of thinking, line of thinking is beyond normal interpretation, students face a little more difficulty. Okay. So in this particular question, right, in the last test, test number 8, I have clearly mentioned the question, how have critical theorists challenged mainstream approaches to global politics? Also, I have given what is the Marxist perspective on international relations, and how is the realist thinking also talking of different ideas on international relations. So, a very key amalgamation of theories this particular question is, okay. So, I can say yes, there has been a direct overlap with the crash course, and it is moderate because it requires one more notch of thinking, fine and conceptual clarity, without which you will not be able to solve this question. Also, I want to show that these themes are important. Realism, there is not a paper in your exam of paper 2 where you can, skip. So, you have to have a very good gist on theories of IR. And these theories of IR not only like realism or liberalism, critical approaches, you also need to have a good command and gist over social constructivism, what are its key scholars, post-colonialism, right? Why? Because in the upcoming time, questions on them will also become more complex in character. ठीक है? तो बहुत अच्छे से IR की theories पे command होना चाहिए. So let's see what should have been the structure of this question. The question is asking, what are the commonalities, discuss the commonalities between the Marxist and realist approach to the study of international politics. Okay. So firstly, you should have said, okay, that realism has been the hegemonic discourse in the study of IR, and how Marxism also as a theory has gained relevance in the contemporary times. Now let's see what is this commonality. In general क्या commonality है? In general इन दोनों theories में commonality है with respect to the idea of conflict. So the assumption that both believe that there is conflict. Okay. For realism, the conflict is amongst whom? The conflict is among state actors, right? And what do Marxism say? Conflict is within the scope of global capitalism, within the scope of global capitalism. Okay. So yes, right? And because of this conflict, okay, we say that yes, they share this commonality. So is this the only interpretation that we stop this question here? No. After pointing to the key assumption in common between realism and Marxism, we say that how other schools of thought, okay, have questioned these mainstream approaches of realism and Marxism to the study of IR. And in alignment with this thought, we will come to what? We should come to the critical approaches. And what is it that the critical approaches seek to do? So Andrew Linklater, Robert Cox, okay, right? What are they saying? They are seeking to establish what? An alternative world order, which should not be by the vision that is guided in the theories of Marxism and realism. So they seek to create an alternative world order of looking at things, and it should be guided by what? These critical approaches say this should be guided by the idea of emancipation, which means states should move beyond the boundaries of state, and the moral boundaries and ethical boundaries should expand. Moral and ethical boundaries should expand. That is the idea within emancipation which you should have put forth. Okay. So yes, this critical approaches also, they learn from Marxism, and they also overcome the weaknesses that are inherent in the Marxism, And obviously they are critical of the way how realists have portrayed international relations. You can also mention the commonality of problem that is being viewed in the concept in the theory of post-colonialist, and how this post-colonialism says that the theories devised mainstream approaches look at IR is very Eurocentric in nature and not able to what? Not able to analyze. So, pehle you have to link this realism and Marxism. And what is the link? The link is the idea of conflict. Okay, so both say conflict is there, even if the assumptions on the basis of which conflict has been designed are different. One say between state, one say between within the confines of the global capitalism. Okay, and then we say ki on this basis how different approaches look at these mainstream theories and how they are problematic in looking at IR. Okay, तो ये flow होना चाहिए था इस particular question का, right? Now, next question. So, the question is asking, bipolar structure of the world is more stable than the multipolar one. तो ये question आया कहाँ से है? ये question आया है concepts in international relation power से. Okay, so we have to study power in detail in international relations, and this question is from there. Okay, so in the crash course I had asked how is growing multipolarity like to affect global politics, and when I was talking of this multipolarity's impact on global politics, I was certainly comparing it the bipolar structure and bipolar, those supporters of bipolar world order, okay, those theorists, fine. And if we look at, तो ये question जो है, this is not new. Already in 2019 also they have spoken of the benefits of a multipolar world. So this idea, this question is very easy, provided you have studied the concept of power very well, you know the polarity of power thesis, right? How hegemonic stability theorists say that we should have one key power which is driving the world politics. So, yes, direct from the syllabus. Let's discuss the structure of this particular question. तो कहाँ से उठाना था इसको? तो इसको उठाना था the very core concept से. So, how power in international relations remains contested. Okay, it is the key but yet remains contested concept. Then you should have spoken about what? You should have spoken about how different scholars provide different benefits to different kinds of structure of power. So those classical realist, okay, then neo-realist, right? So what do classical realists say? Which structure is more stable? So they say multipolarity is more stable, okay. Neo-realists say bipolar structure order is more stable, all right? Right? Then, so Morgenthau, E.H. Carr, right? Neuris Waltz, Mearsheimer, okay. Then also talk about scholars who support what? Why they support this bipolar structure. Why neo-realists say bipolar structure provides more stability than multipolar world order. Give factors. Alright. After this, contrast it with even those scholars who support whom? Who support unipolarity. Who support unipolarity. So your answer gains more dimension. Alright. So Eikenberry, Woolforth, they support what? They support unipolarity. Now we will show, okay, the contemporary context. So yes, Jaishankar says what? Link. Who is stopping you? Why should you go by any kind of monotony? जो present order है, अगर उसको link किया तो automatically more edge. Okay, theory तो we are bringing only, but when you bring any contemporary development, the context of the contemporary order, automatically examiner knows you have applied the concept also. Okay. So yes, what does Jay Shankar say, right? That the 21st century world is becoming more multipolar and we are not likely to turn towards bipolarity. So in this regard, in this multipolar order, what is going to be there? Okay, so he says that, you know, those countries like the developing countries, right, middle powers, they will have more options in terms of security policies, in foreign policies, and they will be able to shape, okay, the way power will move, right, in the international system. So when you bring such kind of idea, automatically examiner knows कि you have not merely what? Copy pasted what you learnt, but you have applied it to the current context. So how in the present order also? So we have to give thesis of why bipolar, those theory, opposition also, and then arrive at a synthesis. Okay. Now, let's see the next question. 1E. So I had asked this question in the test series of 2021, right? National interest. The question at the time was important instruments of the promotion of national interest. Now the idea to tell you this is that, like we know, right, कि prelims में कैसे trend है कि करंट अफेयर्स या कंटेम्प्रेरी आइडियाज जो हैं वो सिर्फ 1 साल या 6 महीने की नहीं है, राइट. यूपीएससी इज अ वेरी ऑनगोइंग प्रोसेस. सो व्हेन स्टूडेंट्स हैव अ होल्ड ऑफ एटलीस्ट, यू नो, like developments that have happened for like 2 years, तभी सारे agreements, सारे policies, right, this comes into your command. Similarly, even if we see those who are you know, those who have been part of our 2021 crash course and 2022 crash course have benefited obviously more, because there will be so many themes which will be, you know, there from the 2021 crash course it will just submerge. तो उस समय अगर आपका अच्छा होल्ड रहा है, आपने चीजों को ढंग से पढ़ा है, तो it will help a lot, right? So any study which has been done earlier also helps a lot. Fine. In this regard, so yes, there is a indirect theme overlap with the crash course, right, of 2021. And national interest is not something new, it has already been asked in 2016. So yes, a very easy question. Now let's just discuss that why it is so. So the question is saying national interest is an essentially contested concept. Okay. Now, why the idea of national interest being an essentially contested concept is because of the vagueness. Question की gist क्या है? It is the vagueness and ambiguity in the understanding of this concept which makes it what? Which makes it an essentially contested concept. All right. So yes, there is vagueness, ambiguity, too much of subjectivity on how this concept has been understood. Fine. ये question की idea है. Let's see the structure. तो पहले हम क्या करेंगे? We have to, any concept which has been asked, you should be able to explain. So yes, you can also use a general definition, or you can quote a scholar and use a definition. So yes, we can use this definition of Vernon Dyke. Okay, right? And what does Vernon Dyke say about national interest? That it is something that states seek to achieve and protect, okay, in relation to each other. Fine. Then what does Morgenthau say of national interest? What does Morgenthau say? That it is the what? Prime motivation, fine, in foreign policy, right? He associates national interest with power, fine. Now we say that yes, it is a contested concept. It is a contested concept. So in this regard, contested because of what? Because of its subjectivity, its ambiguity and its vagueness, and how it has been interpreted. So first is the idea of Charles Beard, okay, and how national interests are termed to justify actions of the state. So you quote Charles Beard. Okay, we can also quote Joseph Frankl, right? What does Frankl say? That it brings ambiguity. Joseph Frankl says it brings ambiguity. Okay, Burchell Scott says what? Why it is so vague? Burchell Scott, he says because it lacks any kind of substantive meaning. Okay, and yes, Muhammad Yunus also says that how Pakistani army projects its interest as national interest. And Raymond Aron calls it as what? Pseudo theory. तो अगर ढंग से पढ़ा है तो you will be able to contextualize well. Fine. So also talk about how social constructivists and liberals point towards how, you know, interpretation of national interest is either due to culture as pointed by liberals, and social constructivists say that it is a rhetorical device to justify action of those who are in power, right? So in this way, how national interest is the very key concept and how it always brings in the idea of subjectivity, right? इस तरीके से अगर हम लिखते तो क्वेश्चन का आइडिया सही होता. Now, next question, question 2a. Okay, now, so the question is asking how has the electoral democracy augmented the participation of people in the democratic process. So we know the question is saying electoral democracy. Okay, why this electoral democracy? What is the idea of electoral democracy? It is representative democracy, right? So there are three questions if we see that I have asked from this particular theme only, right? How struggle for representation increase level and quality of democracy in industrial societies, and here also similar line, how this has augmented participation of people in the democratic process. So line of thinking also is directly matching with the question in the crash course. ठीक है? अब obviously it is part of comparative politics. These themes you should have very good control and very good command. Okay, already also asked in 2012 as well. Fine. So yes, we design a lot of our papers with respect to the relevance of the past year question. Okay, because UPSC has, I said, like in 2022, there is so much continuity. तो जो पुराना पूछा गया, that should have always been your Bible. Okay. Yes, it is a moderate question. Now let's just discuss. So, how has representative democracy, okay, what electoral democracy augmented the participation of people in the democratic process? Okay. So first you talk about what idea? You talk about the idea of representation. Okay, and how this representation brings what? Okay, it brings consensus and cooperation. It brings consensus and cooperation in any democracy. Okay, and how it increases democratic process and participation. So it is because of the process of what? It is because of the process of elections and voting. Okay, that has been done by the people, right? The belief they have with respect to the representatives in the democratic process, which enhances what? Their participation. Okay, so you should have spoken about all the theories we understood, that why people do why they participate in these representative processes. ठीक है? So what is the factors also that is shaping their behavior, and how overall it increases participation, right? Why it augments democratic processes? ऐसा क्यों होता है? Okay, it does so because it builds legitimacy, it shapes public opinion, okay, and it also strengthens, right, the decision making processes within. So it leads to institutionalization of process, where things are not done in arbitrary manner, but they are done with respect to gain more legitimacy, with respect to shape more public opinion and bring what? Political education in a way. So the whole idea of the process of voting, the whole idea of representation, okay, it has brought in also a lot of awareness. But is it how we will conclude? No, you also say that representation is incomplete without participation in democracy. And participation should not only be guided with respect to voting, it also has to be guided by the virtues of participation that it brings to democracy. So even participation as a process, okay, with respect to more activism that individuals exercise in a democracy also has to be there. ठीक है, तो दोनों चीजें साथ में होनी चाहिए. This should have been the synthesis of your question. So line of thought is electoral democracy represents what? Representation. Okay, and what are the ways, what are the theories of this voting that we have done? You should have applied. Now, so question 2B, it is asking, discuss the role of social movements. रोल पूछा है, ठीक है, क्लासिफिकेशन नहीं पूछी यहाँ पे. क्या पूछा? रोल. Role in strengthening the democratic process in developing societies. So if we see, I had already given a question which has also been repeated in UPSC in different ways. Is the rise of social movements, okay, a sign of opening up of popular space in political process or decline of representative politics? And another question also was on social movements. So if we look at the line of thinking, both this question have what? Similar line of thinking. Let's see how. So how should we talk about social movements? What has been its role in strengthening democratic process? So yes, it is a moderate question because it will need some sort of application of ideas, and we can see that how social movements has been repeatedly coming within the examination. Okay, so yes, how social movements, what is the role in strengthening democratic processes? So first you talk about, what you talk of? First you talk of the rise of social movements. Okay, and this rise of social movements, okay, came about why? So why this collective behavior came? It came because there was somewhere decline of what? Parties. And decline of parties to address the people. Why? Because in the modern societies, okay, so, or we say the post-industrial society, modernity has become more complex in nature. And because it has become more complex in nature, okay, so issues of people have moved beyond material issues. We are in a post-material era. So what issues have come? Issues of identity, issues of morality, issues of, autonomy of individual have come into being. Now the question is asking, what role this social movements, this rise led to, okay, and role in strengthening democratic process. So democratic process includes obviously institutional and non-institutional mechanisms, formal, informal behavior. So firstly, if we talk of democratic process and its strengthening, what it enhances? Social movements क्या करता है? सबसे पहले it enhances the virtue of participation. which is very, very foundational to the idea of democracy. Okay, if in a democracy this participation is not there, it will be obviously void, right? Then it is saying how strengthening democratic processes in developing societies. Okay, so you will be also talking of how when people participated in social movements and when they brought issues in the front, what happened? There was a change in the way what happened, even parties, how they worked. So initially those issues that political parties did not adopt, okay, issues of identity, right, autonomy, morality of people, women's issues, LGBT issues, this change, because of this participation, even they adopted these issues on their agenda, though not to a very great extent. So for if we have to talk of developing countries, we can give certain examples also. So developing countries may how it strengthened democratic process. So we see that because of the rise of social movements, what came to the fore, okay, ये हमारे institutional system में भी क्या changes आए democratic process के. So we can say the change with respect to how judicial activism arose and how it became a protector. So even that institution became more active. Okay, then what else happened, right? So we see that it brought changes, right, in multiple values. So which values came to be more revered in democratic process in developing countries? Jaise transparency, accountability. So we got what? We also got RTI, right? Then how social movements strengthen democratic process? So democratic process where if we see transgender movements which initially did not gain what? Too much of focus, even these got limelight, and within the government policy now it has been recognized also as third gender. Okay, one more example that you could have given, that how social movements and talking about women's issues also led to enactment of various laws like sexual harassment at workplace. Okay, so how this will now be, this has been adopted across. So democratic पूरे process को पहले first participation की virtue को enhance किया. तो democracy पहले representative होती थी and parties used to take up issues, but then over a period of time what happened, right, issues came that people themselves started exercising public opinion, exercising their rights, and it came in the form of issues of identity, morality, autonomy, okay, beyond bread and butter issues, okay, quality of life issues. It also strengthened not only the virtue of participation, how it also strengthened the democratic processes that are happening within the formal institutional structures, how they also brought changes in their working. ये भी तो एक part है, ठीक है? With key examples is also the idea. If you wouldn't have given examples, then it would look like a very redundant, copy pasted answer. तो idea है कि दर्शाओ, manifestation होना चाहिए कोई भी idea का, कि हाँ मैनिफेस्टेशन तभी होता है जब आप अच्छे एग्जाम्पल्स डालते हो, वरना अब मैं यही आंसर को सिर्फ थियोरेटिकली लिखती और की एग्जाम्पल्स नहीं देती तो एग्जामिनर क्या समझता, कट कॉपी पेस्ट किया है, ठीक है, वो नहीं लगना चाहिए. इट शुड बी ऑर्गेनिक, इट शुड बी कंटेम्पररी, इट शुड बी फ्रेश. ओके, नाउ next question. So is this theme coming out of the blue? Tell me. UPSC is very smart. Okay, nothing has come out of the blue. Already this theme developed in 2019. So if you would have studied United Nations, if you are looking at contemporary events, the Marshall Island, okay, how it has raised disputes, what were the intricacies involved, कुलभूषण यादव केस, ठीक है. तो अगर तुम ये भी चीजें को फॉलो करते तो ऑटोमेटिकली हाउ द ICJ इज वर्किंग, हाउ इंडियंस बीइंग इलेक्टेड टू द ICJ, ठीक है. ये जो कंटेम्प्रेरी आइडियाज हुई हैं, ये जो इवेंट्स हुए हैं, ठीक है, इट शुड हैव ऑटोमेटिकली आल्सो अरोज सम काइंड ऑफ क्यूरियोसिटी कि ICJ का एक्चुअल वर्किंग क्या है. एंड यूपीएससी तो सीधा सीधा पूछा हुआ है इवैल्यूएट रोल इन द इंटरस्टेट डिस्प्यूट, तो ऑटोमेटिकली कंपलसरी और वॉलंटरी मैकेनिज्म के बिना तो इस आंसर को लिख ही नहीं सकते. और इस आंसर में अगर केस स्टडीज 4-5 नहीं डालोगे तो इंटरस्टेट डिस्प्यूट्स कहाँ सॉल्व की, कहाँ नहीं की, किस एक्सटेंट तक ICJ सक्सेसफुल है, ये बताओगे कैसे, ठीक है. तो हर चीज का लिंकेज होना चाहिए, कॉन्टेक्स्ट होता है. अब यहाँ पे पूछा है कॉम्पोजिशन ऑफ ICJ एंड डिस्कस इट्स वॉलंटरी ज्यूरिसडिक्शन, ठीक है. I had already asked ICJ in the last year crash course test series, evaluate the role of ICJ in solving interstate disputes, and here I had given a key value addition of the composition, structure, working, fine. तो अगर स्टूडेंट्स ने वो भी पढ़ा होता, रिवाइज किया होता, तो it would have helped. So obviously why this question is very difficult, यहाँ पे difficulty does not arise because it requires too much thinking, no. यहाँ difficulty is arising because you will have to factually know, you will have to also have conceptually understood its working. तो जब तक composition याद नहीं, अगर ये question attempt कर रहे हो तो फिर वो तो वहाँ marking होगी ही नहीं. So you had to factually also remember the composition and you also had to remember the compulsory and the voluntary provisions, okay, voluntary jurisdiction. तो अब let's see how you should have approached this particular question. तो question ने पूछा describe the composition of the ICJ and discuss its voluntary jurisdiction. So first you talk of the context. तो ICJ क्या है? Judicial organ है of United Nations, fine. अब right, how it plays a very key with a key objective of maintaining peace and security, right? Then you should have spoken on what? The composition. तो 15 judges है plus 2. So ये composition, they are elected for 9 years by the UNSC and the UN General Assembly, ठीक है. और even very important context यहाँ पर, तो ICJ composition लिखते, उसके बाद jurisdiction, ठीक है. तो अब हम जब jurisdiction की बात कर रहे हैं तो किस तरीके का jurisdiction है, okay? One is the idea of compulsory jurisdiction. अब ये भी एक बहुत बड़ा myth है, I'll expose how. Next is voluntary. Actually, ठीक है, compulsory jurisdiction also applies to what? The idea that states will have to give their consent before ICJ takes that particular dispute within it, okay? तो ये जो जब किसी jurisdiction में compulsory कहकर भी consent है, तो is it actually compulsory? So it is said that this is a myth. Because what do the states have? The states have the option, what? They have the optional clause. तो जब चाहे तब वो कह सकते हैं that we don't fall. So even the compulsory jurisdiction in this sense is very weak, okay? It is very ineffective, right? Now, when I am talking of the voluntary jurisdiction, there are 3 conditions under which voluntary jurisdiction is exercised. So let's see the 3 circumstances, okay? First is that when we talk of voluntary jurisdiction, the first condition is states may consent. States may consent by what? States may consent by any treaty or special agreement, that yes, let in case of any special agreement or treaty that has been signed, they should have mentioned that ICJ will be the one who will be exercising jurisdiction in case of any dispute. The second is the parties, if they draft a clause of that, the parties, if they draft a clause regarding this, right, earlier only, okay, in a treaty, that any dispute that will happen, it will be brought to the notice of the ICJ. So in this case also it will become what? Come within the voluntary jurisdiction of the ICJ. And the third idea, that okay, any general treaty is there among state, and this general treaty also declares, okay, that disputes that arise between them should be referred to ICJ. So in all the three cases, it can exercise voluntary jurisdiction. And the whole idea of compulsory jurisdiction is also what? It is a myth, right? Because states have what? Optional clause. तो compulsory jurisdiction होने के बावजूद भी states preclude themselves. All right? Now, it also has advisory jurisdiction, and that is specifically for the special organs, specialized agencies and others. तो अब आज से हमने क्या चीज समझना है कि जब भी यूपीएससी कोई नया क्वेश्चन पूछती है जो उन्होंने पहले नहीं पूछा, आईसीसीआर हो, ठीक है, राइट, देन आईटेक हो, राइट, टेक्नोलॉजी इकोनॉमिक अग्रीमेंट्स हो, या आईसीजे हो, ये क्वेश्चन आइरिस हो, ठीक है, ये क्वेश्चन दर्शाते हैं कि आगे भी दिस थीम कैन रिपीट, मे बी नॉट इन द सेम डायमेंशन, बट हमें तैयार करना चाहिए, ठीक है. तो प्रिपेयर आईसीजे वेरी वेल, फाइन, बिकॉज यहाँ खत्म नहीं होगा, पॉसिबली के नेक्स्ट ईयर और एग्जाम्पल्स और कॉम्प्लेक्स बना के भी पूछे, ठीक है, और ऐसा भी हो सकता है कि दिस कैन कम इन जीएस ऑल्सो नाउ, ठीक है, टू सी. So I can't be more happy. Question 3A. So when I had taken up the crash course this time, I had specifically dealt, okay, in my theme of Sino-American rivalry, and we had analyzed the Sino-American rivalry from multiple aspects, from the aspects of multiple theorists, be it the realist, be it the liberals, be it the social constructivists, and how they are viewing the present conflict between China and USA, okay, right? Anyway, and we have asked this question also. तो अब जब यहाँ पर हमने पूछा है कि this rivalry, okay, has been there, and second that whether in this rivalry India should come closer to United States. तो जब question ने पूछा कि examine the rise of PRC as a great power, तो ऑटोमेटिक ये जो राइज है, ये राइज से डायरेक्ट क्या होता है, स्ट्रैटेजिक कंपटीशन इज देयर बिटवीन यूएसए एंड चाइना, एंड इम्प्लीकेशंस ऑन एशियन पॉलिटिकल ऑर्डर जब आ रहा है तो ऑटोमेटिकली इंडिया का क्या कंटेक्स्ट होना चाहिए वो तो अप्लाई करना ही होगा. तो भले उन्होंने इंडिया नहीं पूछा, एशियन पूछा है, इट इज ऑब्वियस यू विल हैव टू राइट द इंडियन कंटेक्स्ट, ठीक है. So direct question overlap with the crash course, and it's a moderate question because it will need you to apply things in the right framework. And let's see. So yes, it is also syllabus. Major powers के बीच में relations कैसे हैं? This question, Sino-American rivalry has been being asked again. तो तुम देख रहे हो कि automatically dimension वही का वही है जो पूछा जा रहा है, उसको rightly contextualize करना है. अब एशियन पॉलिटिकल ऑर्डर पे क्या इम्प्लीकेशन है ये भी आना चाहिए. यहाँ पे ऑलरेडी ये पूछा है साउथ और साउथ ईस्ट एशिया में क्या इम्प्लीकेशन होगी, राइट, और वर्ल्ड पॉलिटिक्स पे क्या है. तो समझने की बात है कि लाइन ऑफ थिंकिंग भी सेम है. नाउ लेट्स सी हाउ वी विल एड्रेस दिस पर्टिकुलर क्वेश्चन. क्रिटिकली एग्जामिन rise of People's Republic of China as a great power and its implications on Asian political order. तो अब ये जो idea of rise of China है, this is not coming only with like US recognizing, right, this in their national security strategy and saying that strategic competition has started. Actually, the context of this rise of China, we can say, is how China has been very expressive about its ambitions. And this expression of ambition already started in 2013. Why? Because the earlier idea of their foreign policy is to keep a low profile. And now the key idea is what? The key idea is striving for achievement. तो ये clear expression है that they are seeking the place that they feel they are worthy of. Okay, and that is why many scholars say this is leading to China's peaceful development. अब peaceful development इसलिए है क्योंकि इन्होंने जो idea of rise थी उसको change किया, otherwise it might appear very, it gives a wrong message. So they said China's peaceful development. And ideological support also had been given. तो पहले ये जो राइज है इकोनॉमिक फैक्ट्स के बारे में तो है, बट फॉरेन पॉलिसी में इसका एक्सप्रेशन चाइनीज ने कहाँ क्लियरली किया. सो दे से फ्रॉम कीपिंग एंड बिडिंग अ लो प्रोफाइल टू वी आर स्ट्राइविंग फॉर अचीवमेंट. ओके, नाउ देन वी टॉक अबाउट 2017 and USA's national security strategy and how there has been a strategic competition that has started amongst the major powers. So status quoist and revisionist powers. Then you talk about all the what? You will talk of different paradigms, and in that the scholars who talk of US China specifically. So for example realism में मीरशाइमा, ठीक है, राइट. लिबरल स्कॉलर्स क्या बोलते हैं इस कंपटीशन के बारे में? सोशल कंस्ट्रक्टिविस्ट क्या बोलते हैं? फ्री वर्ल्ड, अथॉरिटेरियन वर्ल्ड. ओके, right, with respect to this particular rivalry that is happening. So yes, you can give the views of Zhao Jianren, Thomas Wright, okay, Axelrod, so J. Kirshner, Stephen Walt, and Robert Kagan. ठीक है. अब क्वेश्चन ने पूछा हमें कि this how does critically examine the rise as of China's great power and its implication on Asian political order. तो अब हमने राइज बता दी, राइज की वजह से कहाँ कंपटीशन हुआ वो भी हमने बता दिया. अब हम क्या बताएंगे? implications on Asian political order. तो ये जो implications हैं, okay, right? So Mearsheimer says that the first place that they will be conflicting is in Northeast Asia. Northeast Asia. Now, how you could have made your answer little more innovative is you could have given the manifestation, okay, of events with some examples ऐसे. तो ये manifestation कहाँ दिखता है? Proxy war, economic war, technological war, ठीक है, जो यहाँ पे हो रहा है. North Korea crisis, right? How US hegemony is being challenged because of China. Belt and Road Initiative, okay. Then how, you know, China is seeking to establish alternative structures, how US is establishing Quad, Indo-Pacific. So just these events of where the conflict has been or their implication has been witnessed. Then you give what? Jaishankar's view. क्योंकि इंडियन कॉन्टेक्स्ट एशियन पॉलिटिकल ऑर्डर में आना ही चाहिए. तो जयशंकर क्या बोलते हैं? सो व्हाट डज ही से? What does he say? So he says the Thiruvalluvar points, okay, that wisdom is to live in tune with the mode of the changing world. Okay, so he says that when there is transitions that occur between superpowers, right, and their overlapping coexistence are difficult even at the best of times, and how this will change the very nature of the habitat, how the entire habitat of the Asian political order will go under transformation. And in this context, what should India do? Okay, so he concludes very beautifully with respect to the clash that is there between these two powers, and he says, yes, that India should weigh its own cause choices, fine, and we are going to rise amidst how we adapt with respect to our own domestic challenges, right, and how we determine our place in the world. So all this will be done, he says, by the India way. So hame, neither we have to be creating more hostility towards the Chinese, neither we should be having any context of aligning with the USA, but it is on our own strengths, capabilities, our value system, our foreign policy that we will be able to accommodate these changes. And wisdom is only that in this change transition, in this change habitat, we have to adapt ourselves. If we do not, then the problems that will come for us will be more. अब इस तरीके से जब हम मैनिफेस्टेशन भी देते हैं, राइट, हम जयशंकर का कंटेम्प्रेरी व्यू स्टैंड देते हैं ऑफ इंडियन कंटेक्स्ट, ऑटोमेटिकली आंसर अपीयर्स मोर ऑर्गेनिक. ठीक है, थियोरी तो हमने लाई है, वो तो देयर हैज टू बी नो क्वेश्चन of how realism, liberalism, social constructivists see this particular conflict. उसके key thinkers है who has spoken specifically on the Sino-American rivalry. ठीक है, तो you should have very well sound understanding of this particular topic. Why? Because until you don't understand the gist of every school of thought, you will really not be able to do any judgment or synthesis if a more difficult question comes in the future. And this topic is evergreen. Okay, तो आने वाला तो है ही ये क्वेश्चन, ये थीम बहुत अच्छे से प्रिपेयर कीजिए, ठीक है, बिकॉज इवन इन द नेक्स्ट मेंस वी विल सी इट इन सम और द अदर फॉर्म. फिर यहाँ पे हम पार्टनरशिप अलायंस भी जापान और अदर कंट्रीज के साथ कैसे कर रहे हैं बैलेंस, ये भी वी शुड राइट. ऑलराइट, तो स्ट्रक्चर में थियरीज तो आएगी ही आएगी, उसके साथ की मैनिफेस्टेशन, कुछ अच्छे एग्जाम्पल्स लिखो और इंडियन कंटेक्स्ट अप्लाई करो. अब सो डिस्कस द कंसेप्चुअल डायमेंशंस ऑफ कलेक्टिव सिक्योरिटी. ठीक है, बहुत ही आसान सवाल है मुझे लगता है पूरे पेपर में, क्योंकि ये थीम्स तो बहुत अच्छे से वी हैव प्रिपेयर्ड, राइट. नाउ so I had asked this question in the last year test series, fine, and the question was, collective security is an idea to prevent war and maintain peace in a better way than the unreliable balance of power. अब जब यहाँ पे conceptual dimensions है ना, this is the same idea that I have portrayed in the statement, कि how it is an idea to prevent war and maintain peace in better way. ठीक है, then obviously the mechanism that is there of BOP. So comment with relevant examples. So direct question from crash course 21, okay. And obviously this theme has been repeatedly being asked. BOP तो बहुत recently भी पूछा गया है. Okay, let's just discuss this particular question, collective security. तो हम इसको कहाँ शुरू से करते? So we would have started this question on how collective security is an important principle of which particular thought? Of liberal thought. So it is the mechanism to maintain peace and avoid war. So liberals say it can be done. Now, when we talk of this collective security vis-a-vis the next idea that we would say, on the other hand, classical realist thinkers and others say, okay, that war, right, and balance of power automatically, which these are the mechanisms in order to keep peace. Okay, so counter thesis ho gaya. Now we talk about what are the basis of this collective security. So yes, Woodrow Wilson, liberal, it has taken the shape of liberal institutionalism in the form of United Nations, how it maintains collective security. Okay, then how he says balance of power is a forever discredited idea. Okay, then we say that Keohane and Nye talk of complex interdependence that has developed among states. Okay, and how this complex interdependence also leads to avoidance of war rather than engaging in war because of the benefits that sake an interdependent state have on each other. Also apply the democratic peace thesis of Michael Doyle, and how he says that those states who are having democratic system do not engage in war. Okay, so yes, you apply Doyle's idea, and how all these are providing sufficient what basis for the conceptual dimensions of collective security. Now we say how collective security is a better mechanism vis-a-vis BOP. So point towards all those ideas that collective security doesn't have any predefined aggressor, it precludes neutrality, it fights on the behalf of the state in all frontiers and not only in few frontiers. Okay, right? How it leads to an integrated society of states, right, with harmony of vital interest, and which is vis-a-vis all the concepts that are there in BOP. ये लिखने के बाद we give a judgment. So analyze collective security vis-a-vis BOP. So you can talk of the present Russia-Ukraine conflict, but we can also show that how other states have showed solidarity also, right, with respect to specifically European Union. But then again, it is all states across the world have not echoed the same thing within the United Nations pertaining to Russia's actions. Okay, so yes, there are certain limitations also that are there to collective security. इस तरीके से हम इसको end करते हैं. ठीक है, तो what we have done effectively, we understood the concept, we applied the various theories that support this concept, we applied how it is, what is it vis-a-vis other concept opposed to it, then we gave the current example, contemporary development, and contextualize our understanding within the question. Okay, now this is a jackpot question for all those who have been part of our crash course. Trust me, I know that there are predictions which happen from the syllabus on the themes, but to predict something which is so unusual, so I'm really happy, and students also told me that ma'am, वो convention जो terrorism को लेके question पूछा था आपने सीधा सीधा, it has come from the test series. Okay, I mean from the crash course. So we asked what is the UN response to international terrorism and what are India's proposal for CCIT. Okay, so this is a direct question overlap. Now this question becomes difficult not because the question is difficult, it is because students don't prepare these themes well. Okay, terrorism, environment, continuously it has been asked, 3 times it has been asked in the last 3 years. तो जब environment पे अच्छे questions आ रहे हैं तो you should have prepared contemporary global concerns, अच्छे examples, अच्छे data, अच्छे theorists, right? जो भी UN conventions है उनकी limitation क्या है, उनको कैसे restructure किया जा सकता है, what are the improvements, इनकी debates क्या है, be it nuclear proliferation, democracy, terrorism, environment. ठीक है, ये सब चीजें बहुत अच्छे से तैयार कीजिए क्योंकि यूपीएससी पूछ रहा है. अब टेररिज्म पूछ लिया तो अभी यू शुड बी वेरी वेल वर्स्ड with all dimensions of terrorism, क्योंकि अगले साल या next year after that it might ask again. ठीक है, so if you are lucky then you can have a direct overlap, and if not then you know 2 question अच्छे से आ रहे हो, तीसरा question So collective security was one question here in this set, and there is US-China rivalry. Okay, both are like very well-known themes that will be asked. तो अगर आपने ये टेररिज्म नहीं प्रिपेयर किया तो फिर आप अटक जाओगे, तो वो सेट ही अप नहीं करोगे, बल्कि इफ दोज हु हैव प्रिपेयर्ड सीनो अमेरिकन राइवलरी दे वुड हैव किल्ड दिस क्वेश्चन सो नाइसली. ठीक है, तो ये आइडिया है कि ये डिफिकल्ट इसलिए है बिकॉज स्टूडेंट्स वुडंट प्रिपेयर. अब efficacy of global conventions to combat international terrorism. ठीक है, तो how we should have moved about this question. तो सबसे पहले concept of terrorism को explain करना है. So how it creates fear, uncertainty, how it is one of the most emotive issues and highly debated concept which brings right contradictory opinions on both sides, right? Then we should have spoken about how it has become an international phenomenon. Then you can also talk of the context, okay, on the attack on the Twin Towers, okay, and UNSC resolution 1373. UNSC resolution 1373 came into being that all states should adopt some actions, right? International community should come together through international cooperation in political, diplomatic, financial and other means in order to combat terrorism. ठीक है, तो ये contextualize करके हम ये कहते हैं कि why international community has been emphasizing on cooperation with respect to terrorism. Okay, then there are multiple conventions. I am not factually discussing them. So yes, you mention all these what conventions. ठीक है, अगर सारे याद नहीं आ रहे तो 4-5 लिख दो key. ठीक है, now you talk of what the true scenario. Efficacy कोई चीज की कब पता चलती है कि ये जो सब बनाया है इससे कोई रियल चेंज हो रहा है कि नहीं. So you should have given facts. Okay, so facts pertaining to, I had already given this in the crash course also. Civil society, facts associated with human rights, right, women rights, then other things ke what is the scenario pertaining to international terrorism. Ab you should have spoken about global counter terrorism strategy and how review is being happening, okay, how we are taking measures to strengthen the response towards terrorism. Countries like India has also proposed CCIT. ठीक है, तो अगर इस तरीके से इस चीज को किया होता तो ये बहुत ही आसान सवाल था, बस फैक्चुअली याद रखना था. एप्लीकेशन बहुत डायरेक्ट थी, लेकिन बिकॉज स्टूडेंट्स डोंट प्रिपेयर कॉम्प्रिहेंसिवली दीज थीम्स, वो डेफिसिट रह जाता है. ओके, तो दिस वे. Now tell me, see the question, direct overlap. क्वेश्चन ने क्या पूछा, 20 मार्क के लिए पूछा है. Identify and evaluate the reasons for deadlock in the WTO negotiations on fisheries between the developing and developed countries. ठीक है, तो यूपीएससी का सिलेबस ही क्या मेंशन करता है, WTO नेगोशिएशन. ठीक है, तो ये जायज है कि जो भी कॉन्फ्रेंस हो रही है अगर वो कंटेम्परेरी इन द न्यूज है वो आएगी. ठीक है, क्योंकि WTO नेगोशिएशंस तो apart from how the international economic system is also part of syllabus, this negotiations has been mentioned. तो ये तो जायज था कि आप प्रेजेंट जिनीवा पैकेज को ढंग से करते. ठीक है, नाउ सो आइडेंटिफाई इवैल्यूएट रीजंस फॉर डेडलॉक पूछा है, evaluate reasons for deadlock. ठीक है, और then with respect to what, negotiations on fisheries. ठीक है, तो I had given how is the global system created by WTO fair and effective. So in this question we pointed off to what extent positives are there of WTO, to what extent it creates inequities in the system. ठीक है, so this should have been obviously followed in your introduction. You had to build the theme. 20 mark का सवाल है. And डेवलप्ड और डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज डिवाइड तो सबको पता है, व्हाट आर द इश्यूज दैट हैपेंड इन दोहा, व्हाई दे डिड नॉट गेट इम्प्लीमेंटेड, ठीक है. सो यस, दिस क्वेश्चन बिकम्स अ लिटिल मॉडरेट अगर आप अगर फंस जाओ कि फिशरीज ही फिशरीज लिखना है, ठीक है. तो आई आस्क्ड आउटकम्स ऑफ द समिट एंड इम्पैक्ट ऑन इंडिया एंड WTO ट्रेडिंग सिस्टम. डायरेक्ट क्वेश्चन ओवरलैप, डायरेक्ट थीम ओवरलैप. तो फर्स्ट यू शुड हैव स्पोकन अबाउट एडम स्मिथ and his theory of comparative advantage with respect to free trade. So what he talks of pertaining to free trade, okay. So he says that trade benefits countries because it leads to what? Specialization in the production, okay, of goods and services any country is best suited to produce, fine. Then we talk about identify and evaluate reasons for deadlock, ठीक है, between developing and developed countries. तो यहाँ पे हम लिखते हैं कि what have been the pros of WTO and what are the critics of WTO saying. ये लिखा, ठीक है. तो इसमें ये समझ आ जाएगा कि क्यों डिवाइड है डेवलप्ड और डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज में, हाउ इट हैज हेल्प्ड whom. Now we come to the contemporary context. ठीक है. अब यहाँ पे हमें फिशरीज में क्या क्या चीजें हुई, अभी भी उसमें क्या लिमिटेशंस है. सो यस, देयर इज आल्सो वॉलंटरी पैकेज, राइट, वॉलंटरी मैकेनिज्म टू असिस्ट डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज दैट हैज बीन देयर. एंड व्हाट हार्मफुल सब्सिडीज विल बी रिस्ट्रिक्टेड, इलीगल, राइट, unreported and unregulated fishing. However, what is the issue? Still, what is the deadlock? Okay, it has not eliminated, it has only restricted. So in the long term, these activities will continue only, okay. तो भले डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज के फायदे में कुछ चीजें हैं, लेकिन टू व्हाट एक्सटेंट दे विल बेनिफिट. देन यू शुड हैव सेड दैट in this regard the commerce minister has pointed that the Geneva package has been, and this particular ministerial conference has been very successful with respect to India, and this summit also has mentioned about WTO reforms which have to be done. तो पूरा end to end होता ना issue, that yes, when we are saying it has importance, it has virtues, even it needs to be reformed. Direct continuity has been there. We also talk of pros, how it creates fair system, how it does not create a fair system, how developing countries are impacted, underdeveloped countries are impacted. फिर contemporary fisheries पे आते, तो theme भी build हुआ and question is also addressed. So it is how smartly you would have utilized what it was given, ठीक है, in the crash course, in the understanding of the theme, ठीक है. अब सीधा सवाल है, ठीक है, इसमें कोई डिफिकल्टी नहीं होनी चाहिए. व्हाट इज द रियलिस्ट प्रिस्क्रिप्शन टू दी स्टेट्स टू एंश्योर देयर सर्वाइवल इन एन एनार्किकल वर्ल्ड, ठीक है. तो अब कोई भी पेपर होता है PSIR का, पेपर 2, इट इज वेरी ऑब्वियस दैट वी विल प्रेडिक्ट इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस थियोरीज में रियलिज्म के क्वेश्चंस. सो यस, वी हैव आल्सो हैड 2 questions on realism, and obviously there is direct overlap, and it is very predictable also कि this theme has been asked. अब जस्टिस है और आप जस्टिस, इक्वालिटी, डेमोक्रेसी अगर पेपर 1 में ढंग से तैयार करके नहीं जा रहे हो, तो दिस इज लाइक यू नो अपने पैर पे कुल्हाड़ी मारने वाली बात हो गई, ठीक है. क्यों? बिकॉज वी नो कि यहाँ से सवाल आएंगे ही आएंगे. तो रियलिज्म तो इतना ढंग से ये सब चीजें प्रिपेयर्ड होनी चाहिए कि कैसे अभी सवाल आए कोई दिक्कत नहीं होनी चाहिए, ठीक है. सो वेरी इजी क्वेश्चन, व्हाट आर दी ओके realist prescription to the states to ensure survival in an anarchical world. So let's see what should be the structure. So first talk about how realism is a dominant theory in the understanding of international relations, how it characterizes international politics as a struggle for power. Okay, right? Then we talk about whom do they say is the key actor, right? State is the key actor in international politics. And all states are guided by what idea? Okay, self-survival. So yes, anarchy is a natural feature, okay, of the international politics. Ab, what is their prescription to states? तो प्रिस्क्रिप्शन है कि रियलिज्म की जो डिफरेंट आइडियाज है वो स्टेट को कैसे सर्वाइवल के लिए, सो व्हाट दे टॉक ऑफ पॉलिटिक्स, what they talk on national interest, what they talk on the means that have to be adopted, right? Okay, then what should be the nature of state, how state should do things, on the nature of state. In this only bring the key differences of classical realist recommendation and neo-realism's recommendation. So you will cover the holistic idea of prescription given by both schools of thought. ठीक है? Then obviously we criticize. So give the critiques of realism. Critiques of realism. ठीक है? तो बहुत ही predictable question, predictable theme. Okay? Now, direct from the syllabus. So, there has to be no debate, I think, कि some themes have so much emphasis that they gain because of the events that happen over the year, like the theme of Quad, or like the theme of AUKUS, like the theme of Indo-Pacific. ठीक है? So they have already asked Quad 2 years back. Right? Similarly, Russia-Ukraine was one event which was predicted at all levels of exam, be it in the prelim, be it in the mains, और अभी भी आने वाले इंटरव्यू में भी ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है और किसी भी डायमेंशन से पूछा जा सकता है. तो इसका होलिस्टिक कवरेज करना तो it is inevitable. There has to be no doubt only. Okay? So yes, I can claim a direct overlap because I'll tell you, I had given 3 questions. The first was India's stand on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Second, what measures should be adopted by EU to address the present challenges? And in this present challenges, I dealt comprehensively in the class on the Ukraine war and what should be the response that EU countries should be doing and what should be the steps they should be taking up in the future. Also, another question was, what are the causes of this conflict? So we had given a very good theoretical view on the causes of the conflict and impact. And this impact I had taken on the countries, on the world in general, on food security, on volatility, on energy security, on supply chain, okay, on technology, on nuclear. So multiple dimensions we had analyzed even the impact. And what are the possible solutions? So yes, question be it EU's link with energy security has been very, very directly picked up from the crash course. ठीक है? Expected theme है, syllabus में नहीं mentioned है, but because of the importance it has gained, obviously it had to be asked. So अब let's see the question again. Russia-Ukraine crisis has cast a dark shadow on the energy needs of the member states of the European Union. So, how should have you contextualized the Russia-Ukraine war and dependence of Europe on energy security? So, first we could have spoken about actually the importance of Eurasian region and how power politics has now, taken shape because of the developments that have happened between the Russia-Ukraine war. Then you should have spoken of the key conflict that is between, okay, Russia and Ukraine, and key factor obviously being what? right? NATO expansion, house security. And this conflict, you should have given some theoretical ideas, realism, liberal idea, social constructivity, how it is a matter of creation, right? After explaining the conflict, explaining importance of Eurasia, then you should have showed the key dependence of Europea, of Europe. So you should have spoken even about Germany, okay, how there is key dependence, total Europe's energy needs, and out of that, how much percentage has been imported from whom? From Russia, okay. So this key dependence, and now after this conflict, how it increases what? What? It creates a dark shadow on its energy security. ठीक है, तो अब इसके implication, इसकी dependence के लिखते हैं आप, implications, and how now this will happen. Now you would have given, okay, what should be the response that Europe gave despite this energy security. So how they acted in solidarity, and they put sanctions on Russia despite their key dependence. तो ये जो sanctions है, they will have uncertain effects. They might impact the European countries, they might impact Russia. It can take any shape. So you should have spoken on the uncertainty of sanctions that will come and how it will impact, you know, those sectors which have not even been targeted. तो ये sanctions का uncertain impact बताते. And then what should be the possible solutions and future steps that EU should adopt in regard of its dependence on Russia with respect to energy security. Steps was very, very key. So in this way, you should have comprehensively addressed all dimensions. From the region where this conflict has taken place, what is the nature of the conflict, give the key school of thought, then why there is key dependence, give factual data, how this implication of this dependence is there on energy security. Okay? Then what has been the response despite this dependency and how it creates more uncertainty in the future, and then what should be EU's response. So in this way, for the future now, keep one thing in mind, that whatever past last 10 years themes are there, when you prepare for the exam, all these themes you are thorough with, okay. Question can be asked in the same dimension, it can be from a different dimension, पर at least ये themes miss out नहीं करनी है पेपर 2 में, ठीक है, right? Be it any factual idea also, क्योंकि वो factual किस साल conceptual बन जाएगी हमें पता नहीं, okay. Second important thing, कि हम जो भी पढ़ते हैं specifically in paper 2 or IGP or theory, I feel everything has a manifestation around things, right? As a going to be civil servant, don't become copy paste mechanisms. Like, you know, you have to start thinking. Your success will not be determined by the kind of reading material or by the kind of resource availability you have. Your success will be dependent on how you do interpretation, how you make key interlinkages, and to what extent you are a thinking mind. So I completely feel that the pedagogy with respect to paper 2 should be manifestation has to be there in a student's mind. If a person who is only studying without looking at things, then you are not a thinking mind. And I don't think then, you know, we need such kind of civil servants in the future. Okay, so ensure your interpretation, your thinking ability, all these also improve, because questions are interpretation based, and those themes which are well known, you should prepare them well. तो पढ़ने के साथ सोचना, interlinkage करना, right? ये बहुत ज़्यादा important है. So we'll soon meet tomorrow for a YouTube live session, okay, on what should be the strategy that you should adopt for 2023 mains, and let's connect then. All right, thank you so much. We'll soon come up with section B discussion also with a detailed analysis, and paper 1 also detailed analysis. Thank you so much.